All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. We've been talking about different JavaScript concepts using some miles per gallon programs. And what I've done so far is I went through a simple miles per gallon where everything was in a driver, then we modularized it, then we went back in and changed it in three ways. All right. First, we added control flow. We added an if statements, or two if statements, so that we had some actual error handling in there. Then we added a while loop so we could run the program repeatedly. And in our last example, we went through and we added a for loop with arrays. Now I want to come in and talk debugging and error handling. And you may have noticed when I first got in here what I had up. And you might think, well, what is this? Years ago, when I was at a different job, I started looking online for different tutorials because I had a feeling that when I was trying to explain a concept to the class, it wasn't getting through. And sooner or later, I got to this guy's site. And it's Dick Baldwin. And I believe at the time he was teaching either at like Wake Forest or someplace in, I think somewhere in North Carolina. And it says here Austin Community College, and I could be wrong. Maybe that's where he was. All right. So he's got all sorts of different tutorials. Java, JavaScript, and I haven't looked at his stuff in years. All right. But just another place for you to go look if you're interested is, if you notice here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lessons on JavaScript. Now, are these going to be a bit dated? They might be, but the ideas behind JavaScript have not changed. All right, why am I telling you this? Because in his Alice programming, Mr. Baldwin had a pretty good example here of going over some of the different kinds of errors that you can get. It says there are at least three kinds of errors that you can encounter when writing computer programs. Syntax errors, which are errors of the language. Using a wrong case, adding punctuation where it shouldn't be, not putting in punctuation where it should be, etc. All right? Second are runtime errors. Now, runtime errors don't show until you run the program because you're asking the program to do something that it cannot do. All right? Now, they talk about the classical divide by zero error. If we try to do that, I think we get infinity in JavaScript, but we'll check. All right? And there are other ways that you can get runtime errors too. I know a classic one in JavaScript, a classic runtime error is to try to print out the value of a variable before you've set its value. And the last one are logic errors. Logic errors usually result from a combination of one of three causes. You didn't understand how the program's supposed to behave, you didn't understand the behavior of each operation, or probably even more often, you were careless. All right? So again, I would highly recommend, if you get the time, and if you don't, you don't. But if you get the time, check this out. It's interesting because somehow I had gotten a hold of Mr. Baldwin. I don't remember the whole idea behind it, but I had gotten a hold of him. And then he got a hold of me, saying that he was getting ready to retire. This was probably about 5 years ago or so. And the place that he was working at wanted him to go back and get more education, which he thought was kind of ridiculous because, again, he was getting ready to retire. So what he asked was colleagues that had been using his stuff over time if they would write a letter of support for him to tell him that to tell his superiors that he had a good knowledge base. And I did. Why not? So again, if you want his JavaScript, it's http://www.dickbaldwin.com/TOC for table of contents, jscript1.htm. I don't know if there's a JavaScript 2 looking in here. Even it did add a Python tutorial. Again, beginning, intermediate, and advanced Java. That's all that I see. All right. So let's get into our program. And let's talk about some of the mistakes that I purposely added in the program. So again, we're going to run this 3 times. So in this version, there are all sorts of syntax errors, and I'm going to fix them. In the second version, there'll be runtime errors. All right, and in the third version, there'll be logic errors, and I'll come in and try to fix each one of those. So what did I do? Well, some of these I marked off. Instead of max miles, I put max mile. Now that's not an error, but every time I try to use it later on as max miles, those will be errors. So when I go to run this, and as soon as I press this, boom, I immediately, nothing happens. When that happens, always a good thing to do is to right mouse click. Now I'm using Google Chrome, which I'd highly recommend that you use. But I right mouse clicked and I choose inspect. All right. And it'll actually show me, oops, I can open this up. I know there is a way to open it. There we go. That we can look at all the stuff that's in here if I wanted to do that. I don't particularly want to right now, so I'm going to go to the console. Notice it says main is not defined in the onClick. Well, we've had that before, and they're saying there that it's in line 20. So it doesn't like this onClick equal main. Well, I can tell you right now there is no problem. There is a main here, but there are some mistakes in a few other places. So first let's fix that. All right. And then let's take a look. Notice what I've changed here. I'm calling a routine that doesn't exist. Gallons used with a Z. All right. So I'm going to run this again. Refresh the browser, run it. I still get nothing. I inspect again. I might get the same error that I got before. And I am. And I will tell you the reason that I'm getting that error is later on in my program. All right, later on in my program, I'm missing a parenthesis. All right, so here I also put MPGs instead of MPG. So you're seeing the kind of errors that you get. All right. So let's see, we got that, that looks okay. There it should be an S, okay. But notice here, this is where that error is. I've got a beginning, but I don't have an ending. All right, so let's try to do this. Let's put an S there. Remove that S. We'll do that first. We'll go back to our program, refresh, run, still doesn't work. Go to inspect, go to console, still says main is not defined. So it still has something in there that it does not like. Well, I want to put that back so I've got an S there. Oops. Let's run it again and see if we're making any more progress. Always refresh the browser before you do this. Again, I'm going to expect that to keep giving me errors. All right, still giving me that. Okay, that's all been fixed. So let's take it from the top here. All right, min miles, max miles, def miles, min gallons, max gallons, def gallons. Okay, how about that? That's not technically an error in JavaScript, but it's considered very bad practice. Let's see if that did do anything. It probably did not. Oops, I want to do an F12 here, and I want to Still going to probably get the same error. All right, but now I've got new errors. Now it's telling me that in script line 89, there's something that it doesn't like here. And it's interesting because I've got this open here. I guess I'm going to have to close that. So let's go down to line 89. Oh, notice I spelled function wrong. All right, so now let's try it again. Still I'm not getting anything, so inspect. Missing a parenthesis in line 93. You see how it's sort of walking me through this. All right. Well, I actually don't need this parenthesis, but that's not what the error was. Sometimes that's what being a programmer is you just keep running and running and running your program. You make some changes, you run them. Again, script line 93, missing a parenthesis, right paren after the argument list. And it's not that, but I'm missing here a plus sign. That's what the error was. All right. Still have errors. Line 102, invalid or unexpected token. I didn't put in my closing double quote. All right. Again, you see what this is. Now, hopefully, one of the things that this is showing you, and there notice, I've got is not a number is in there incorrectly in line 98. What does that mean? Right there. All right. But what I'm trying to show you, among other things, is the fact that when you run a program, you should write it in bite-sized pieces, check those pieces, and continue on. All right, line 114, I spelled parse int wrong. I did this the other day, and I'm even forgetting some of the errors that I put in. Still an error, but it's getting closer. All right, miles driven not defined in line 81. Because here we put it in as mile driven. All right. It's so easy for you to make a mistake. Not trying to. But you can see how the different kinds of mistakes that you can make and how easy they are to make. All right. 81 and 136. Now that's miles driven. And that's miles driven, so that looks okay. And 136. Well, those should have been MD and GU. Remember, we can change the name. Remember up here when we called the routine, these are called actual parameters because that's the way they were defined. But down here, they were called formal parameters because we can call them anything we want. And those are the two there. Let's save it. Let's try to run it again. Okay, that was good. Let's run it another time and let's put in error values in here. And it changed it. And it changed it. I actually think now we've got it back to where it's actually running the way it's supposed to. But you saw, and what I was trying to show you is the fact that syntax errors are errors in these rules of the language. Sometimes the best way to fix a syntax error, and I did not show you this, is to just take the code. So if I had an error and I knew that it was in, let's say I knew it was in here someplace. All right, as an example, it's in this routine somewhere, but I don't have a clue as to where it is. I comment out then the whole procedure and start uncommenting or adding lines back in a line or two at a time until I find the line that's an error. That's a great way to program. It really is. But again, the takeaway from this is when you're running these programs, okay, write a little bit of code and test it. Write a little bit more and test it. And keep writing like that. Don't just write the entire program and then test it. It's just not a wise thing to do. All right, let's try this is the example with a for loop. All right, so let's see what we have in here. Now you notice we've got miles driven, and then we're printing it out right away, but it doesn't have a value yet. All right, is that going to provide a problem? Let's see. It's telling us again, main is not defined, and then on click, which typically is going to mean, as you saw previously, typically what that's going to mean is that's not a problem unless I didn't call it main, and I did. So there's probably, again, a problem, and the problem is in here someplace with parentheses. Looks okay. That looks okay. Looks okay. So let's just take it from the top here. Let's do it the way I told you to do it before. And that is, let's go and, got that alert here. Let's take everything else that's in our main routine. All right. So let's start commenting stuff out. So I'm commenting out everything except that alert. Okay, now this code can be erroneous and can have problems, etc., and it won't hurt anything because I'm not calling it. So the only thing I'm doing in here is this. That's all I'm doing in main. All right, so let's run it again. Refresh, run the program. So what do we get now? Still says main is not defined. Now it says unexpected token in line 130. So it is possible. Well, what do we have here in line 130? That's something I was going to show you later. So let's take all of this and let's comment out everything that we have in here. All right. So I'm commenting out the entire program, and we're going to bring it back in a few lines at a time. So the only thing we have in here now is this. Okay, in fact, I'm going to do this. Now that's now commented out. And we'll put in that, and I'll put in my ending curly right there. All right, let's save this, come back and try to run it again. Notice it says miles driven is undefined. All right. Technically, that is an error because I'm trying to use the value before it's been initialized. All right? So let's comment that out as we get these done. I'll uncomment this. All right? And now we're going to go down to here. So what are we doing? We got gallons used. We've defined that as a scalar or a single variable, but now we're trying to use it as an array, which is, again, an error. But notice with runtime errors, I don't get an error here. The program is trying to, it's not till you run it. Now I'm getting an error. I inspect, and it's saying can't set property 5 of undefined. So it's telling me I've got this variable that I created right here whose value is undefined, and I didn't say that it was an array, all right? But I'm trying to set an element in it. What if I do this? Equal bracket, bracket. All right, meaning that it is an array. Is that going to change anything? Let's run it again and find out. Notice no errors because we were treating it like it's an array. So even though we haven't done anything else with the array yet, it's now not an error. I'm going to change this back. I'm going to comment this line out. Take that out. MPG, I think all this stuff is okay. Again, equal true. I think all that stuff is okay. And we're going to have an error here. This doesn't even exist. Window.frames. So that should give me my next error, I believe. Oh, input miles driven is not defined. Okay, so I tried to call the miles driven, and remember, I commented that out. Okay? So, let's uncomment this. Notice we're going to have an error here. We're using a keyword as the name of our variable, which you cannot do. All right, saying in 131 we've got an error. Look familiar? So if I said var4.1, okay, you notice the blueness went away. Well, now we're getting input and output, but nothing printed, so what else is going on here? Does not exist is not a function. So line 189. We're calling a routine that does not exist. All right, that looks good. All right, now that still didn't print the second time, so there's still an error. Parint is not defined on line 168. You saw that in an earlier example. Can't parse int, that doesn't make any sense. Again, all I'm trying to get across to you is it is so easy when you're doing this stuff to make an error. Okay? Okay, it looks at least like it's working now. So you saw in that example how I came in and set up a lot of different runtime errors. So the program looked good. The error wasn't uncovered until I tried to run the program. All right, finally, let's go in and bring in an array program. And I believe there is a logic error in here. If there's not, I'll introduce one. Now, when you do miles per gallon, now I've multiplied instead of divided. All right, I think that's the only error that I introduced into this program, but we'll find out. 200, and I got, well, notice that's invalid, so there's an error. 10, and it says my miles per gallon is 2,000. Well, a lot of times when you've got a logic error, something will literally just stand out to you like this, all right? Well, notice it's giving me still invalid input. Still giving me invalid input, etc. All right. I also noticed, I guess I've been doing this for a while, where I'm telling you to input. We don't need that paren. Or, plus, I guess we should have a paren here. Okay. I think, let's see, did that fix it? See, I put that last paren back in there, and that one is still missing. Okay. Now I've got to peruse my way through this. I think that's like 3 times. Hopefully that's the last time. There we go. All right, it does not like my input of 200, though. Looking at that, it's not a number, or it's greater than. That should be if it's less than min miles, or it's greater than max miles. Again, those are, what did we say? Those are logic errors. They're errors in the logic of the program. So let's try to run this one last time and see if we've got those errors out of there. 210. Okay, I still didn't fix that other one. So I still have to peruse my way through here. 3, 4, 5. That should be it. Come back to my JavaScript. Change that miles per gallon back to a divide. Save it and run the program one more time. 200, 10, 20 miles to the gallon. Run it again. 300, 300 miles a gallon. That'd be nice. Run it again. Bad input. Reset. Bad input. Reset. That looks okay. Out of range input. Reset. Out of range input. Reset. That's okay. Okay. And we're done. Whoops. Oh, I thought we were done. Now we're done. So what I tried to show you in this series of examples, so we're done now with this, is I tried showing you how syntax errors or errors in logic, syntax errors or errors of the language are introduced into the language. I spelled things wrong on purpose. I forgot semicolons. All right, I did all sorts of stuff here. Yeah, I broke the rules. From there, we went to runtime errors, where the program was running. And I should mention that I say in here that I grabbed this. I always try to give attribution when I grab a URL. So this is from HTML Goodies, which is a nice site. JavaScript Basics, and there's examples of syntax errors. And there are runtime errors. So they give you some. I grabbed their errors almost directly from in here. So I treated a variable that wasn't defined like it was an array. I called something that wasn't implemented. I used a keyword as a variable name. I called a method that doesn't exist, and I called an illegal parse operation. And all of that is explained in here. Okay, so it's in the code, but if you do want to see this, so it's going to be way too big a font. It's under http://www.htmlgoodies.com/article.php/361.008.1/javascript-basics-part-11-htm. All right, I'm going to come in here and try to grab this just to see if we can go to the beginning of that tutorial. All right, it says there part 11. Primers, there's JavaScript. So there is, it looks like a JavaScript tutorial. All right, that the author breaks down. Every author has his or her own style. So again, if I come into here, if you want another reference for you, you can go out to there. Okay. So when I return, I'm going to come back and we're going to look at working with the document object model and dynamic HTML. I will have two examples from this program that we've been working with. One of them will be more where I use HTML to do my error checking, and then the next one we'll use JavaScript to do our error checking. So I'll be back with that lecture shortly.